Hello, hello. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of The Feelings. I am joined by one of my good friends, amazing man, awesome coach, Arjuna Oneal. So, welcome, welcome, welcome.
It's a pleasure. It's good to see you here. Thank you.
Yeah. Just to be start us off with, this has been a long time coming. We've tried to have this record this multiple times, and the timing for whatever reason it didn't work out. But the universe is like, now is the time.
Yeah.
We got divine energy in the mix, and they making it happen when it needed to happen.
Yeah.
First, just to get us started, I want people to understand who you are. Just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing as far as your coaching and that type of thing, and then we'll get into the real reason why we're here today.
Yeah. Thank you. Janice. Well, I like to start off by saying I am a proud father of five beautiful children. Um, you know, that I've been able to create with four different mothers. And I say that with excitement and appreciation. As a black man with multiple children and different moms. That was something that was I was always shamed myself. So I just wanted to start with that. And from that journey, having five children with four different women, learned a lot about myself as a man, a lot of different things that, growing up as a man that I did not know in terms of parenting and just how to be in this world. And that journey has taught me so much about myself and still learning and growing, but it also, I feel like it gave me a well-rounded scope of what a lot of men go through in terms of just relationships, even if they're not fathers, just how they show up in their relationships, their partnerships, romantically, financially, emotionally, mentally. And that led me into the arena of actually now I professionally coach men leadership. So, I consider myself a men's leadership mentor, and I do coaching as well. But, the powers that be, have me doing this work at a time where we have seen men's mental health, especially men of color, BIPOC, on the rise. And so that is my focus. That's my primary focus. And yeah, right now, this is it. As we wrap up 2022, just want to gift, the audience with something that they could literally change their lives and start off 2023 in a whole new mindset.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because that is what is going to really be the catalyst to the change that we need in our communities and our families and just our people, is a change in mindset because it's got to start there in order to, spread to the collective. Um, so just to give a brief background, I am a former child support specialist. I'm now a journey coach, so I help individuals, couples, families um, find peace through their conflicts, through their differences, and also, root them together to find to improve the mutual health and well-being of the entire family. Um, Part of that led me to realize, that. Um, there's too many people that have ulterior motives as far as their involvement in our families and domestic situations and that type of thing. So it's going to be the community's responsibility to give an alternative, and really encourage and help people find healthy ways to deal with these issues on their own. So when I discovered your story, Arjuna, of course, again, divine divine intervention was like, yeah, I need you two to tap in so y'all can build this, relationship so that way you guys can have this conversation right now, and it's just an amazing, you've had such a inspiring journey from, just, and you'll tell your story for sure. But, just from where you were to where you are now is, um, it's pure, it really should. I want everybody to know, just because people need to know that it's never too late. It's
Yeah.
never too late to, get yourself better so you can be better overall, especially in dealing with these types of situations where you are separated from the other parent. You may be separated from your child. That child is going to become an adult at some point. So how you deal with these things now are going to determine what type of relationship you can have when there's not another parent standing in the way. So I definitely want to, wherever you would feel comfortable starting, as far as, just talking about your experience, especially when it comes to, learning about the system and how child support, would has affected you along your journey so far.
Yeah. you know, uh, there's the I want to say the common narrative of you know uh, black families that grow up with single parents, right? Or they may have both parents in the home, but there's two different agendas going on, and the relationships are unhealthy. Um, and so, for me growing up, starting off, uh, I just would hear my mother a lot, express how, you know, it was financially challenging for her, as a single parent. And then, you look up, and then that was the story with this person, that person, that person, this cousin, that cousin, this relative, all the moms, all the aunties, the sisters, whoever, everybody was on this journey of trying to figure out how to be a parent alone. And then you saw, for me, what I saw was not just the lack of the finance, but I saw what it did to the spirit, to the way it harmed my mother emotionally and mentally, the way it kept her in a certain frame of mind. And from seeing that and witnessing that, and then just being on the receiving end of that hurt, that struggle, that anxiety, that challenge, I programmed it. Right, it stayed in my in my subconscious. And those moments just continue to stack, and then you start seeing it all around you in the neighborhood. You go to other friends' houses, and you hear the mom saying the same thing. You would hear everybody talk about how the daddies were no good. And at that time, I didn't know I was going to be a father. I was out here living a certain lifestyle, um, following in my father's footsteps. And interesting enough, didn't want to be like my father, but that's how it turned out. You hear a lot of men say they don't want to be like their dad, but then you look up and they're either pretty much uh, a mirroring, example of their father. And for me, I was like, wow, well, what can I do to change that? What could I do? And I became a father young at 19. And one of the things I made very clear to myself, I didn't know how, but I said, I never want to be a father where my kids, don't have or go without because I wasn't able to provide. And my mother taught me well about being responsible. In one sense, I was responsible. In one sense, if you think about it, well, 5 kids, 4 different women, how responsible were you? Right? There's that question. But then there was the part, well, okay, maybe I'm not responsible, but let me be accountable. Right? So cool. I checked off the responsibility piece. I guess I'm not too responsible, but I get to be accountable, right? I get to be present and take responsibility in that regard. And so, at 19, I was shot, and it was interesting because I had already had one son, and he was young. He wasn't even. I think he was a year old, and I was shot. I was shot by a woman that I was dating at the time, and after being shot, uh, I died at the scene, went to the hospital, and all the things, and God gave me a second chance. But I found out after the fact that she was pregnant. And of course, all the thoughts, the feels, everything came through. And I'm like, man, here I am. They don't know if I'm going to live or make it. They told me I'd never walk again. I'm paralyzed from the waist down. I can't feel my legs. I'm thinking to myself, Lord, why would you put me in a situation like this? How am I going to be a parent? No mobility. I mean, I know people have done it, but young, Black, trying to figure out my life. And then I got 2 kids now. I got one on the way. And I knew then I had to change. I knew I had to make some major shifts, and I really started working on my mindset before I even knew if I was going to live, walk again. And in that shift of the mindset, I was like, I got to figure out how I'm going to be there for these kids, for my kids. And so, as you go through the process, you get hurt, filling out the paperwork. I ended up getting up Social Security. And when I got my Social Security, I remember the first thing I said was, they asked me, well, do you have any kids? And I said, yeah. So I put my kids on my Social Security. I wasn't really thinking about me at the time. I was, I still was, at that time I was living in the streets. So I still had that hustler mentality, that hustler's cash flow. So I didn't think about, getting Social Security for myself. So I awarded it all to the children. And I'm telling that piece because, even in those moments, like you said, our kids grow up. And I always wanted them to, I didn't know how long my street life was going to last, or if I was going to continue to do what I was doing in the streets, if I was going to be able to get out in time before I got hurt or incarcerated or killed. So I wanted to make sure my kids had something. And I started there. But then as I started really making those types of moves and doing those things, I really started thinking like, well, hold on. Why would you, if you can make these types of choices, why not make the choices to actually change your life so you can be here? So that doesn't have to be the case. And, going through that. And then as time goes on, making certain shifts, certain things started to happen. I'm starting to see myself, and I'm also understanding like, wait, I need to get my kids out of the environment that they're in. And I wanted to leave. I wanted to leave the city of Detroit, where I grew up, where I started this whole journey, where I'm from. And in order for me to leave, I had to have some permission from my kids' moms, and as this story is going on, I'm still making babies. At the time I only had 2, and then told me the hospital told me, I couldn't have any more kids, and me just that part I believed, but I didn't believe nothing else they told me. Interesting, because you want to be able to have your cake and ice cream eating too, so you're like, all right, cool, that'll work. Now you get to laugh at it. and so looking at all that, Janice, I understood that there's a process, how this works. And I knew that at that time, my first son, his mom was on welfare assistance, and a lot of people don't know that, we think it's free. It's not free. It is not free. And there's a lot of people that are miseducated and misinformed that it's free. So when you start to learn how this stuff really works and understand how child support works and all these things work, it changes the game.
Mm-hmm. So, and it just to be thorough, I want to break it down.
Yes.
So when a parent goes on monetary assistance or welfare, and it really is based on cash, they don't care about food. They don't care about medical. It's really about cash assistance. In that documentation, it says that you're assigning your rights to any child support that is legally owed, that is owed to you as the other parent, the custodial parent of the child. Yeah. So what that means is that even if there wasn't a child support order prior to the aid, the state is going to get a child support order against the non-custodial parent, the parent that is not in the home every day. And then you owe the state. And so now they're collecting child support, and there's nothing the other parent can do. Y'all could be on good terms. Y'all could have worked it out. And as long as she's receiving that aid, they're going to continue to charge, regardless of what you're doing with your child in your child's life. You could have your child 24/7 until they have. I mean, you have to literally jump through hoops. Like if she does not tell them that the child's no longer with her or them, then they're going to continue to collect from you. They don't care. They don't care. There's no kind of urgency or anything to make sure that you are not being taken advantage of in that situation, which again is part of the reason why we are having this conversation. Yeah. So back to you. Yeah. Continue. I just want to.
Thank you for breaking that down because, I learned all this stuff early on. And I would say, because of my background, one thing, my mother was big on education. She was big on school books, reading, and always talked about forms and reading documents. I know a lot of times we just sign things, but I would read things and really read. And before I would sign anything, I would read it. And I literally would get harassed for reading. I used to tell them, what do you mean just sign this? I'm going to read this paperwork. I'm not just signing anything. So from reading, I started to learn. I started to see that fine print and see those terms and those conditions. And I understood. And so when you read it and you learn, okay, there's child number 1, right? And sign. Child number 2, sign. I'm like, oh, these are starting to add up, and so when I learned how the system worked, and then I finally got myself together where I decided to, pack up and leave Detroit. And most of the kids' moms were okay with it. My daughter's moms, because they were girls, they weren't okay with me taking my daughters with me from Detroit to California. And I didn't fight that. Okay, I understood that. But even though I had consent from the boys' moms, we still had to do it. I made sure I did it legally through paperwork, just in case there was ever a moment. We're still young. We're still going through our stuff. We're still trying to figure our own selves out, learn ourselves and how to co-parent and how to be healthy adults. But then there's moments where things happen. And, like you said, the women come into your life and then they hear about it. There's things that can cause conflict. So I tried to set myself up way before to do everything right. I know how the system works. I know how the system sees a Black man in this specific spotlight. Mm-hmm. So, and from seeing it from my father and other men and other Black men in the family, just culturally, just seeing how the stories have been placed over us and the different misunderstandings and the stereotypes, I wanted to set myself up the best way possible legally on the books. So if anything ever backfired, hey, I followed protocol. I went through the process. I did it the way you said it was supposed to be done. So I went to court, legally got the court's permission after having the mothers of my children give me the permission to take my kids. And so when you learn more about how that process works, they ask you questions. Are you able to financially provide for your kids? All the things, how long will you have them? All these different things. Will they have medical care? All these things, and like you said, so whoever has custodial rights, it switches. Mm-hmm. But I knew that the mothers weren't in the financial position that I was in, so I didn't press that issue on them. I just made
which is also a cultural thing, because I noticed in the 7+ years that I enforced child support, it was so rare that a man actually pursued child support and opened a child support case against the mother, regardless of how flagrant, how nonchalant, how no fucks given about the child, them at all. Yeah. It was because society says that the man's not supposed to do that. But yet society in the next breath says the woman is supposed to do that and encourage it and, help you perpetrate whatever makes it easy for fraud to be perpetrated in this sense. So, it's it speaks to, just the programming,
Yeah.
and how, the people that are the puppet masters, how not only are they controlling the game, but they're also controlling how people understand the instructions on how to play it.
Yes. Yes. And, another big piece of that is, at one point I ended up, being incarcerated. And what you learn and what you learn from going when you get booked and you sit in that bullpen and you find out there are so many men that actually are coming in on traffic warrants, small misdemeanor violations and things like that, but they can't leave because they got child support holds. That's the only, and what you learn is that one of the only holds that you cannot bond out on is a child support hold.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can have bond money and all that, but if you have a child support hold on your lien, you're not going nowhere. You got to see the judge on it. They're not playing. And it's interesting that you bring that up. So now you start to connect the dots and see how there's the whole system and strategy on how this works. And a lot of people, if you've never been inside, or if you've never been locked up, or or you just don't know how that works, you don't realize there's a lot of Black men in jail just from child support holds, right? They did, ticket violations, small, like I said, misdemeanor claims, but they're still in jail because they have these child support liens on. Now, why? That's a whole nother conversation. But just to show how it works, there's a whole systematic play to this whole thing. So, learning all these things, it really empowered me to really figure out, okay, as a Black man, I can sit back, I can continue to say the system, the things, all the things, the powers that be and the puppet masters and all that, or I could literally just change the way I live, change the way I behave, change the way I think, just upgrade my life full circle. And so I'm actually grateful, that I was able to learn early as a young Black man and start making those shifts, and then try to encourage other Black men and teach what I knew and how I was able to navigate the system. And I will say this though, Janice, because you don't really see a lot of Black men step into the role the way I did, I had a lot of favor from those judges, right? When they saw me on it and filing the paperwork and making those court dates and showing up and having my receipts and all the things that they needed, I got a lot of favor in it, there was a lot of respect, and I didn't take it personal. I didn't fight it because I knew that the system is already designed the way it is. So I didn't allow myself to become, entangled in the nonsense of how it's structured. I just knew that I wanted to make sure that my kids were going to be good. I'm going to be good. I don't need to be in jail for something that I know I'm taking care of my kids, or whatever the case may be, and how they find a way to, separate, because you're in jail on a hold because you can't pay child support. You may not have the money to pay child support, but you could be a dad that's actually at home, right? I knew there was a lot of guys that were in there, but they were actually at home. I'm listening to them call the mother of their children, and there's nothing, like you said, there's nothing she could do. When those holes are there, there's nothing they're calling, and she said, he said, the kid, and then daddy's not home. So I understand how they set it up in the sense of thinking it helps and it makes it work so they can get what they need for those children. But like you said, a lot of that money doesn't even make it into the home.
Absolutely.
A lot of money doesn't even make it to the home. So it's an interesting, and we'll continue to keep having these deeper dives about it. But this is the overarching of, But you were going to say.
No, I was just going to say that besides the fact that, because in my role as a specialist, of course, I have access to, their statistics and their research and all that, and according to them and their calculations, they're like, yes, we're bringing all this money into the homes of these families and all that. But when you collect millions of dollars that is going to the state, and there's no supportive services, nothing towards mental emotional, no kind of like financial literacy, like nothing that is directly improving this family's ability to be self-sufficient, even though, you go to their websites and you check their mission statements, that's what it claims that it's doing.
Yeah.
Um, but none of that's there. They're just a bill collector. And then yet they, in the same breath, they want to change that narrative. They want to make the populace believe that they're more than that and that they care about the well-being of the children. But if that's the case, then you wouldn't fight. So you wouldn't use every possible tool you have to separate the parents from their kids. Like you would be doing everything you possibly can to get them together, and want to be together, and that's, the one of the biggest reasons why, if it's possible to avoid the system at all costs, it needs to happen. Just because, I mean, there are reasons why it should be in place. I
Yes.
think if domestic violence is an issue, and like, for the safety of that child and, the other parent or whatever, but yet, the parent still wants to contribute, you know what I'm saying? Then, okay, you're the middleman, collect, y'all ain't got no problem taking it. We know they don't want to ever give it back.
Yeah.
But, there are situations where child support is a could be a useful tool, especially in situations that have parallel parenting. And that's something I'm going to talk about, at another time, the difference between co-parenting and parallel parenting. But basically, those people that cannot like be civil in any kind of way, that's when you would have like a child support situation. That's where, they should maybe be involved. And it still should be something set up where those funds are going towards the child, like whether it's future based, whether it's a trust fund or, something that directly is for that child, and there's no confusion about where it's being used, that type of thing. Because again, that's just a distraction. That's part of the game,
Yeah.
to keep the dysfunction going, is to, to make it so that, there's that, oh, well, my child support is not being spent on the child, that whole argument, because they let it happen. They let the abuse happen in order to just make that a justifiable argument, so.
Yeah.
But again, we're going to dive into it, over the course of us doing this series. So
There's so many layers. There's so many layers. There's so many layers
mhm.
to this whole, child support. Was it CD? I don't know the acronym for the child support services,
Oh,
but
let's see. Well, the overarching for like the federal government for the United States is OCSE, which
okay,
is, Office of Child Support Enforcement,
okay,
which is basically, created, in 1975 out of the Social Security Act.
yeah,
And of course, it's morphed through there because now they have a lot more power. They have a lot more ability to invade people's assets and, control aspects of people's lives when it comes to child support. Like you said, with the holds,
yeah,
the fact that, that is a hold that you cannot bond out of. And most of the time, you would have to basically have your family or somebody contact child support and make some kind of arrangement on how they're going to pay your debt.
yeah,
And some states are like zero arrears. Like,
yeah,
there's so many actions in place, so,
yeah.
but.
It's interesting, but I want to say this piece to it. For me, it really, in terms of someone that may be listening to this and think, and just have a completely like fuck it mindset about child support. Oh, it's the system, yada yada yada. Cool. All I want to say is from my own personal experience from being in the role of mom when I was single father, when I had custody of my two of my boys, I got to see the other side. I got to see that just because, there are men that may feel a certain way because they are being garnished, right? Their checks are being garnished from child support. And you thinking to yourself, man, they just took 500, they just took 300 or whatever the amount is. and you see it as a loss, right? Well, having custody of my kids and understanding now, when you're with them 24/7 and you're out and about and the miscellaneous things, foods and the snacks, and you live with your kid and they're asking for things, school supplies, clothes, things change. That check only comes once a month, right? There's things that they need, doctor's visits, medication, things that happen, constantly there's money coming out your pocket. So when you start to see like, oh, wow, man, that 300, that 500 only covered so much, it changed. Now for me, I started to have a newfound appreciation and gratitude. I was like, wow.
And I really, that's why I am such a proponent for 50-50. Like, I really think that in situations where there is a separation like this, that should be like the standard, unless, circumstances prove otherwise, and that it needs to be, in a different situation. But it should be somehow, he should have the experience of raising that child 24/7 for a period of time, because then it helps build a compassion and appreciation for each other as a separate parent, just as parents. Because remember, if you're coming out of a divorce or a separation, that's trauma, that each of you are dealing with, because this love has ended abruptly for whatever reasons. And a lot of times that's not dealt with. So when you don't deal with that, then, that can affect your abilities to work together as parents, because you share the child that you both love and created. So that's why it's so important that there's healing that's done, which again, that usually isn't done. And I definitely applaud you for being able to do that, and I mean, I'm not saying that your journey to that wasn't easy. I imagine that it took a long time, especially, forgiving, that, just being able to get to that place of forgiveness, which is again, something that I think is one of your most best gifts, that you're able to teach people about that. If you wouldn't mind talking about, how important forgiveness has played in your journey so far.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad, because I was actually just thinking too, like we're talking about child support, but I was like, what about just the fact that it's a blessing and a gift to be able to create another human, right? And like sometimes I feel like these conversations are talked about as if these kids are like problems, right? Like oh, I gotta pay child support, but like you made this human, like, and that's the biggest blessing. Even though I was going through a lot at the time, and I had been sexually abused, and my traumas and all my things, and my dad raised me to be a drug dealer, a hustler, and be heartless, and all these things. It wasn't until I seen my first son, as a baby, a newborn, and it was like, wow. I like, whoa. As much as I may have these stories about myself and the way I saw myself and the way the world saw me as this unfit person, or this wild human who's out of sorts and just didn't look fit for society, here it is. God still gave me the opportunity to create a beautiful human. And I was like, wow. For me, it was the most profound moment of my life. And I said, well, if God found me worthy enough to create another human, then there's something I need to start looking at what it is about me. What can I do differently? There has to be something more to my life then. Because God wouldn't put me in a position, or wouldn't allow me to be put in a position where I can literally be in charge of another person, another human, and have that type of level of responsibility. I think that's just something we don't talk about that in just terms of parenting at all. You don't really hear parents sit down and kick it about just that level of responsibility, that level of intentionality, that level of care, concern for another human. If you really sit in that, in itself. And that's what I did. That's where the work started to really happen on me, because I'm like, man, this is a big deal. But not only is it just a big deal because I'm a parent now, it's just a big deal to be for me, it was like being nominated to be a president, right? Now, seriously, when you think about it, like, I'm in charge of something, a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
And I really started to sit with that, like, man, because the way life was looking and the way I was being projected on and labeled, I wasn't shit. You're just another dude from the streets.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to look at that and really take that in, because I had to start doing my own self-talk. Couldn't wait for somebody else to, encourage me or inspire me that having a child or becoming a father was a big deal. I had to really sit with that myself. That was between me and God. But I will say I had a beautiful example. Now, some of the ways that my mother taught me and raised me now as an adult, we've been talking about this recently. Over the pandemic, when we were in quarantine, that there's some things that mom, those things no longer serve, but she showed me some things, her responsibility, her decisions, choices, and actions, the way she dealt with raising 3 kids on her own really put me in a different way of thinking about it. So when I was shot by this woman and found out that she had a kid, we were going to have a baby, I understood from going to school too. I was educated. I was smart. I read the books. So I understood certain things that were happening. I'm like, well, if the baby lives inside her womb and she feels how she feels and she's going through this type of emotional pain, I learned how, whatever the mom goes through, it feeds into the baby. So I'm like, well, man, if I don't want my son to turn out to be a disaster or come out and be born and have all this emotional trauma and hate the world and become a worse version of me. So that forgiveness, I knew I had to forgive myself first and forgive her. I had to have and God gave me the opportunity. I remember laying there dying slow. It was like, hey, Arjuna, there's 2 ways you can do this. You can go by the street code way, the way you've been taught, or you can forgive this woman. And, in that moment, I was like, God, but, shit, like, I'm over here busted up. I'm dying. Like, she done shot. What you mean forgive her? And I sat with it. I said, whoa. I said, well, look. Then I said, wait a second. How are you going to talk to God like this? And if you was doing it right, if your way was right all this time, you wouldn't be in the situation you're in. So I was like, all right, let me pump my brakes. And I know this is all happening in a snap second, but it sounded like it was a long time, but it wasn't. It was a very short window of being shot, and then before the ambulance came, and before I died. So all these things are happening real fast. But I just want to say that moment of when I chose, I said, all right, God, I'm gonna follow your plan. I'm gonna listen to you. Because everybody else I didn't listen to and myself, I ended up here. So I'm gonna surrender. And I remember choosing to forgive her. And I didn't even know how. But just by saying yes, something happened within me that when I came back out of the surgery and was in ICU and in recovery, she was there. And she just looked so sad. And I felt so bad because of all of my pain and hurt that I didn't even see how she was hurting. So I really made it about not creating another version of me. And I really wanted to change for my first son and then the son that was coming. And so I knew the forgiveness piece was not just about me and her. It was about also creating a certain type of environment and mindset and connection for her to carry this baby for 9 months and then to her to have this baby. I didn't want her to resent it. I didn't want her to resent having the baby. I didn't want her to resent being a mom again with someone that she shot. So there's so many things that I had to work through and process through. But I can say this now, that if I was to talk to her right now on the phone, you wouldn't even know that was the woman. And my son, beautiful, 21-year-old now, he's responsible for doing this thing. It was worth it. And sometimes, people ask me, well, do you regret it or would you? And I don't recommend anybody going to get shot just so they can change their life. But
no, please don't.
That bullet was a miracle, right? It was there. I realized that wasn't just your typical, for me, in my belief, that wasn't just another regular random shooting that happened to another black man in the inner city. Just to be when I looked at all the pieces and how it went and what happened in the process, I'm like, this is God's work. I got a mission. There's something I'm supposed to do with this. There's a reason why this happened to me specifically, because of the person who I knew I felt I was supposed to be in my heart, but even though I never was able to express that and articulate that and be that in the environment that I was in. But when this happened, I saw it clear. Because when you think about it, there's so many Black men that share the story of being shot or that domestic violence or that rage or that towards a Black woman. And I was like, I get to talk about this on stages, right? I get to bring this to the light. I can heal soul and help heal so many Black men and women and change the future of Black children. So this is an honor and a privilege to be here to talk about this.
Hey, I'm just happy that are able to have this conversation together to blend the two because as I've learned, every situation is different, but every story is important.
Yeah.
Because it gives you a better understanding of not only your own situation, but also what is going on around you. A lot of times we are moving, and because of distractions, we're making decisions and choices without all the information, without all the necessary understanding, especially now we live in this digital age where it's out there. Like Google is out there, there's resources out there, but learning who is the right resource is the problem, and it's all about intention. Like both of us are able to sit and have this conversation because we both believe that healing is the way. Healing, starting the heal with the self is going to help heal the rest, So I just thank you so much for just taking this, being a part of this journey with me. Because, we're going to have more conversations. Talking about different things, and I think this is definitely a good start, just to get the ball rolling. So, is there anything that you would want to leave us off with as far as this our first episode, to I guess just encourage people to come back because, it's worth it. I feel like, what do you think? Why should they come back to check out the next one?
Because I'll tell you why. As a Black man and just as a Black people, we see, I'm 43. And the stories and the plight and the conditions and the chaos and the struggle has been here since my whole life. And my mother, I hear her say the same thing. And then my grandmother said the same thing. So what I'm saying is that it is what it is. And it's been this for quite some time, right? We can fight about that. And at the same time, understand that we're continuously to evolve as people. We're continuing to make babies. We're continuing to create more of us that are coming into this system, into this setup. And if we feel the way we feel about it, right? If we're going through what we're going through and we feel how we feel about it, and we're going through our ups and downs and the ebbs and flows of life and the pain and the trauma, then it behooves you as an individual to pause for a moment and really just think, damn, if I feel like this as an adult, what is this child going through? What could this child possibly be carrying and may not even have the words or the way to express that and talk about that? And so for me, it's like, if I feel this way, I can only imagine what a child or children are going through that are watching the adults that are going through this and things that they're seeing and the stories that we see going around virally. We see our kids doing this. So it's like, the question you get to ask yourself, do you really care? Right? Or do you only care when it makes you feel a certain way? Mm-hmm. And if you're someone who's like, hey, I really just feel stuck and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. I've tried this, I've tried that. My family this, or the mama's this, or the dad's that. this is why you come back, because you get to learn from other people's stories and journeys that can have a solution. They may not have the exact answer to you, but then you also realize that you're not alone. And we can see that as a collective, like you said, the individual has to start the journey first. Yeah. In order for that to be an opportunity to support, help your child or help children, or it may not even be you as a parent. You could be an aunt or an uncle looking for a way to support your niece or your nephew. Right? Maybe you hear something from me that you could speak to somebody else and say, hey, look, I know somebody who went through something that sounds far more crazy than yours, but look how he changed his story. Look how she changed her story. And we get to learn from each other too. So I encourage you to come back if you just want to figure out a way that you can be a blessing, not only just to yourself, but maybe change your family dynamic, your generational situation. Because there's answers.
Yeah.
There's answers. Now, we may not have the only answer or the exact answer, but we got some solutions. I've been working at this for 22 years. My oldest son just turned 23 yesterday.
Wow.
And all my kids can tell you, through all this shit that I may tell you, Daddy ain't never missed a beat. From day one. And all the moms will tell you. Now, him as a person in a relationship, I may not get that scorecard, but if you ask him about his parenting, about the way I father, oh, I'm a 10 all day. And that's why I can speak to this stuff publicly on social media and on these outlets, because I can stand on that.
Awesome. Hey, I don't think I could give him a better reason than that, because I mean, yeah. So, okay. So we are gonna, okay. So we'll see you on the next one. Click the link in the bio, follow Arjuna, and yeah,